Hey, what's going on, people? This is True News 16 once again, and we're going to talk about what's going on with this craziness, this confirmation vote for Judge Kavanaugh, and these accusations. And we're going to look into this, and we're going to see the emotions that are tied behind it, and all that in conversation form from a Christian worldview perspective. Stand by. So I'm going to make it short and sweet. This is something huge is happening. It's a historical, really, situation that's going on with this confirmation and the stuff that's going on with the emotions and the way the country is turning. The polarization in this country is just becoming worse and worse and huge, bigger and bigger. And we basically, I'm flabbergasted. I'm just shocked. I'm on my butt, floored, trying to figure out how on earth did we get here to a point where we've got a bunch of senators, government people who are supposed to know how to run a country. And most of these people are lawyers. And yet, all of a sudden, the question of an accusation without evidence basically just flies right out the window. Okay, the protection of a governing principle, a legality, a long-standing legal a principle, like you're not guilty, you're innocent until proven guilty. Something like that could just fly right out the window and disintegrate, be lost, and people cannot find it. And we got a whole Senate full of lawyers and people who are supposed to be defending rights and defending legalities of this country that hold down together this country, that supposed to keep it in place. And people are still talking, somehow convincing people about a man's guilt based on the fact that he's angry because his daughters and his wife are getting death threats, and because of pure emotion. Emotions is what's driving these people, and the ringleaders are the same people who are supposed to be for the law. And they're trying to dig up dirt on this man. Before the accusation, they were trying to disrupt the hearings, the decision to have this man. The man was calm, cool, and collected until they started to accuse his family, started to get death threats. And this woman came literally out of the woodwork, saying that he was the one who molested her or assaulted her sexually. And this woman, the only thing that, in my perspective, that is credible with this woman's accusation is that she seemed to be telling the truth in terms of demeanor. But in terms of evidence, she didn't know where it was. She didn't know if it was in 1982 or in 83. She didn't know where it was at, what house, who was there. The two people that were supposedly with her, 2 or 3, even maybe 4 people, said that it didn't happen. It's just, and now they want to lynch this man, and lynch in terms of his reputation, a very decorated man, based on a character that has been described like 30 plus years ago when he was a kid. Okay? And mind you, the kids these days are doing things that make them look like demons compared to what he was doing. And he was acting the fool, probably like John Belushi. And yet America loved John Belushi for being John Belushi. Okay? But yet they want to lynch this man based on these accusations, and then they want to somehow align the non-lynching of this man with the lack of support of women who are abused across history. How do we get to that leap? How do you jump that far? You don't, if you don't lynch the man, that means you hate women and you don't want to support them. All the women in the planet who have ever been abused. How do we connect those dots? Basically, the woman has no evidence. And the two other women that also came forward have even less evidence. So much so that they were not even mentioned during these hearings because they knew that there was really nothing there. They asked to try to stall for an FBI investigation, even after the man had 6 FBI investigations during the course of his many years within the system. And nothing turned up in that sense, that he had done anything illegal or anything wrong. But then one weak link chain, and there are many weak links in the Republican Senate. Well, one guy gets cornered by a bunch of activists pretending to be regular people in an elevator, and like a ding-dong, he stays there with the news media recording him and having these women scream and have this whole emotional, hysterical circus to try to have it on the news, to get women all over this country roused up about abuse on women, as if this has anything to do with evidence. Now, when people come to you and they tell you, but don't you care about women that get abused? I tell them, but don't you care about men and human beings, men and women that get accused without evidence? Do not let them move it from there, because they want to move it and they want to pretend that this is about women's abuse. Well, it can't be about women's abuse because as far as we know, okay, the target of that legitimacy hasn't been demonstrated. All we have is a very credible physical performance of a woman saying that someone did something to her. But what hasn't been established is the whole reason why she's there in the first place. And that is that he was the one who did it. But without evidence, why is she even there? So really, if this woman did go through that, she's twice victimized. And the second time around, it was the woman was victimized by the Democrats because they held on to her issue. Okay, they held on to it until the very last 11th hour to bring it out to try to stall this nomination, all because they think that somehow this man has some kind of influence. It's funny because for Christians, true Christians, we know that this man may be just as big as Flake is, as the Senator Flake, because he has said many times that he respects the rule of law and that he respects the precedence of law. And we all know that precedence is not the Constitution. Precedence is basically the defense of the Constitution, but it's not the Constitution. So if you misinterpret the Constitution and create a precedent, that doesn't mean that the precedent is as black and white as the Constitution is itself. All it is a misinterpretation of the Constitution. So if he's going to be loyal towards a precedent and not the Constitution, then he's not gonna do anything to save the slaughter and the genocide that continues going on due to Roe versus Wade. He's not going to do that. But somehow you've got these leftists and these extremely confused and people who they're, I mean, I really believe every day more and more that these people represent, many of them represent the giving over of a feudal mind that Romans 1 talks about. These people are long gone, some more than others. Others are like in a hypnosis. And how do you know? Because they cannot place themselves in Kavanaugh's position. They place themselves in Blasey Ford's position because she's a woman. But they cannot place themselves in the position. Now, what would you do if you were accused by somebody who said you did something over like 32, 35 years ago? They can't place when it happened, where they were, how they got there, how they got back home, key details of what had happened. But they said, oh, it was definitely you. But everything else, they just didn't have evidence of what was going on. How would you feel if someone did that to you? No one's stopping to think that, and no one's talking about it. And it's just not in the conversation in any of the mass media. And because the left controls 99% of the media, well, you're never going to hear that perspective. Okay? Now, I don't know who this man is, despite that he was very professional, and there's way more evidence that he has been professional and he has done what he's had to do in his life, in terms of his professional career. But someone threw out there the fact that this woman has done self-hypnosis on herself. I don't know if that's true. It was thrown out there. I don't know if it's true that her brother is, CIA, worked for the CIA or some CIA connections or whatever regarding between her father and her brother. I don't know where that goes. I saw that floating around, but I noticed that not even the Republicans brought that up. So I figure, okay, they didn't bring it up, that perhaps it's not really legit. So I leave it alone. But nevertheless, we know that still, we don't need to dig dirt or go and turn into the National Enquirer on this woman because she doesn't have any evidence. And the fact that women are abused and have been, or the fact that people are poor, or the fact that people starve in the world, or the fact that bad things happen in the planet has nothing to do with whether he actually did this crime. The question still remains, did he do it or didn't he do it? And you cannot say that, well, we don't know exactly that he did it. There's no real proof, but look at the woman's face. So he has to go to jail, or he can't be a judge because he got angry that he was accused of being a rapist, because he put a frown on his face and he showed a smidgen of emotion and called out these Democrats for what more than half of the country feels that they are, a bunch of reprobates. And because he expressed anger in that sense, you're going to say that he is character after he spent hours and hours sitting there just swallowing garbage beforehand, especially those protesters that had to be kicked out in the first couple of days of the hearings. I mean, come on. It's laughable. It's laughable. But when people have completely lost their minds, you're no longer sitting in a rational scenario. And so people are not going to even talk. If you notice, when you're talking to a person and the person just starts to yell and carry on and they toss themselves on the floor, and it's like literally talking to a child. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And that's pretty much what they do when they don't want to hear the word no, Or they don't want to hear, well, I can't do that now because I have something else to do. No, I want to go now. They don't want to hear the no. They don't care about the facts, or they just want what they want at the moment, at the time, right now. Give it to me. Instant gratification. So that's how these adults are now acting. And that's why I believe that they've been given over. Many people in this country, in this world, have been given over. And I think that's the disease of liberalism. I think that's what brings on the notion of life being relative. I believe that whole Darwinian and Marxist mentality is what starts eating away at the brain, and people just lose the ability to rationalize. It's self-control and discipline just flies out the window. Nevertheless, we'll keep watching this situation. I say, and my last message for Christians and for believers in the Lord is, don't worry about this. Don't get too caught up in this hype, because we do not depend on the arm of the flesh. We don't depend on that. God is the one who watches over us, and our faith is in him. And so until next time, thanks for joining me. This is True News 16.